Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Nicstalgia. I'm super excited to have my guest Liana here with me today. We're going to talk about all things dating, technology, pop culture, and the intersection of the three. So, hi, Liana.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, we're going to jump right into it. You have a podcast. It's called The Ghosts of Dates Past. And so you've heard tons of stories about dating. And so I want to talk about how pop culture, whether it's a certain movie or TV show, whatever, basically influenced you and shaped your ideals of like what dating, quote, should be like.
Yeah, such a great question. I grew up watching, from when I was a little kid, Disney movies, classic. Saw, the Disney princesses and this idea of my Prince Charming will come or the one. And that kind of idea that they're just going to plop into my life. Super easy, just show up, poof, they'll be singing animals, all that kind of stuff. And then as I got a little older and started watching Disney Channel, watching Hannah Montana and Wizards of Waverly Place, and they constantly have these little crushes in their lives. And then me as a young teen think, oh my gosh, who's going to be the person in my high school? Who's going to be this person who notices me out of everyone else? And I just will get a boyfriend and everything's going to be great. And movies, I think, doing the same thing, watching rom-coms, watching Mean Girls constantly with my friends. John Tucker Must Die. Those were two of the biggest ones that we would just replay at hangouts with friends. And yeah, I just feel like it was a very unrealistic expectation of what high school would be like and what dating would be like as a young person, that you're going to 100% find someone. There are movies that have, the underdog kind of character meeting the really popular person. So that is something that you think is 100% going to happen, or that there's going to be the secret romance and all this kind of stuff. And it's just not the case. So I think, just painted a very unrealistic expectation for me as a kid.
Yeah, when I was a kid, Ariel was my favorite Disney princess, and I was so obsessed. And now looking back on it, the idea of just washing up on a beach naked and some guy being like, cool, it's a little bit shady, okay? And also when I was a kid, I was Jasmine for Halloween, and I wore that costume every single day until it disintegrated. I wore it for months, and I feel like as I got a little bit older, I started to identify, or I guess since I wore that costume, I already did identify as a 3 or 4-year-old, but with Jasmine as someone who's like, yeah, I do want to fall in love, but I would like to do it on my own terms. I'd like to make my own decisions. I don't want other people telling me what to do or how I should live. And again, she's someone who literally, her dad's a Sultan and she lives in a castle and she has a pet tiger. So not super realistic also, but still it's like you forget when you're such a little kid, these ideas come up. And when you're a kid, you don't really look to your parents for an example. Because it's almost like you're too young, but it's like, but you are getting these messages so young. I remember having my first crush when I was in preschool.
Totally. Same. Probably. Yeah, I did. It's coming back to me. I think his name was Bradley.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So, okay. I recently came across a home video and I was putting on a show for my parents, as I usually did. And I was giving an introduction saying, me and I said something that was kind of indecipherable, like me and so are putting on a show from Barney Sing-Along for mommy and daddy. And then I listened back to it and I'm like, me and who? And I think I said whatever. His name was Jared. I think I said me and Jared, as my crush from preschool.
That's adorable.
I actually saw him in person at a coffee shop a few months ago, and he definitely doesn't know that he was my first crush, but
that's so cute. I mean,
Yeah,
innocent,
the impact
innocent.
that people leave on you.
For
Innocent.
sure.
Yeah.
So cute.
Yeah, and I feel like as we got older too, especially with those teen kind of movies, it's like the oldest story in the book where it's like Katie and Regina are fighting over Aaron Samuels and everyone's fighting over John Tucker until they're not. And it's really interesting seeing how all these dynamics play because isn't it hard, right? Like as a teenager, you cannot decipher what is real and what is imagined or what was scripted or what was made for a movie. Like, don't you think that's confusing?
Definitely. I think that was, I mean, so my parents were very healthy tech when I was growing up. And that's a big reason why I started TTYL, my company. And so I actually wasn't allowed to watch TV during the week at all. So my experience was binging and being a couch potato from Friday through Sunday every weekend growing up, or running home after school with a friend, making Annie's mac and cheese and watching everything that happened on American Idol that week. And then, going to Disney Channel and watching whatever Disney movie or whatever was on. So I definitely feel like as I got older and I got a laptop when I was in high school, and so it all went downhill. Obviously, I'm sneaking the free Hulu. Remember when Hulu was free and there were no ads? I'm watching Hulu at all hours in my room, but I found these incredible shows like One Tree Hill and Friday Night Lights and Skins UK and Misfits, if you know those British shows. And I was just so blown away by the different storytelling that these shows were representing and the realism, the authenticity. I felt like that was really an era where TV was definitely changing a little bit. There was still the CW shows. I was obsessed with Vampire Diaries just as much as the next person. I watched Pretty Little Liars and all that stuff. But on the other end, I'm watching these really profound stories, Lost and all of these shows that really influenced me to be who I am. And, going on and studying theater and film and TV as well in college. And so I just fell in love with the idea that there are real stories out there and that there are meaningful conversations that are being had. And it's not all this fluff and butterflies and rainbows that are representative. I think as we evolve, I remember thinking, and I think my mom said to me, there'll be one day where you don't want to watch Disney Channel anymore. And I just couldn't part with that idea. I just thought, what? I'm always going to love Hannah Montana. I'm always going to love Wizards of Waverly Place and Sunny with a Chance and like all the Disney shows, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, whatever. And of course, I evolved out of that because I think it also, in the same way that Disney movies do, Disney Channel is kind of the stepping stone to creating this bubble that we live in to make kids feel safe and make kids feel like there is hope, and that these ideas of Prince Charming and these ideas of love or going after your dreams and all that stuff exists. And I think that is a really beautiful thing, but it definitely paints a false reality almost a little too much, to the point where you grow up thinking, I'm going to be a pop star. That's just going to happen. And that cute guy that's super popular is going to notice me and we're going to get married. So I think it's a very interesting dynamic. And then once you kind of realize there's so much other media out there for you to digest as a teen and going into college, that you actually find that you relate so much more to those characters.
Definitely. And you're from New York originally?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel like the depictions of what New York love and romance are? Because that's its own category of unrealistic media.
Totally. Well, it's funny because Gossip Girl was actually filmed on my block and around the corner from my apartment. I've seen Blake Lively and all those people film around me multiple times. And I actually never watched the show. I've seen episodes here and there and kind of just like for fun, like watch the first couple seasons, but I never really got into it. I just felt like it was such a false depiction of what my life was like. And yeah, there's snippets. I did go to private school on the Upper West Side. I grew up on the Upper East Side, you know, all that stuff. But I just felt so disconnected from that level of wealth and just, yeah, ridiculousness that the Gossip Girl world lives in. And that's not to say that there aren't those. I didn't go to a prep school where I had to wear a uniform. So I think that in itself, there were definitely kids being dropped off in Escalades and things like that. But the overall, the drama and the things that actually happen, I mean, yeah, there was definitely drama that went down in my high school. But to the extent that Gossip Girl portrays it as, or these amazing parties, no, that did not happen. That was not a thing. And especially for me, I was just way more of a let's go to the movies and get Pinkberry kind of girl with my friends. So pretty much, I feel like a very tame high school experience on my end. And it was definitely there if you wanted it, but you didn't have to do it, obviously. And in terms of romance, I feel like, I mean, now being an adult and dating in New York City, it's pretty unglamorous, I would say. I feel like, you know, now that we have these dating apps, it's so different than I think if I was in my 20s 10, 15 years ago, I think I would have had a very different experience because I think the standard would have been very different for men and women. I think we've all lowered our standards completely. And I also have learned from spending a lot of time on the dating apps and then veering off them, even during the time where I spent time off the dating apps, that I did this intentionally for 8 months. And even recently, I haven't gone on a dating app date in 7 months. And so what I found is that if you focus on yourself and if you put your energy in the right place on you, you can show up for other people. And if you, in turn, take your energy out of things that are sucking it, like the dating apps, you are going to attract people in person. And I found that I've been meeting people in person over the past several months. I met someone at a 90s night. I met someone at my friend's house watching Survivor. I met someone at an engagement party. I meet people at bars. Being open to the opportunity, I think that's when the magic happens, is when we can make these in-person connections. I think the unglamorous part are the dating apps and the somewhat magical moments that, yeah, they're not going to be these picture perfect, I run into you moments. Like, I don't know why I'm thinking of the movie Just My Luck with Lindsay Lohan and Chris Pine. That just popped into my head. But, you know, the serendipitous, oh my gosh, I'm going to meet this perfect man kind of situation in New York City. I don't think it's not possible. I think if you put your energy out there and believe that you can meet someone, then I think you can bring that energy into your life. But it's all about going in with no expectations and being open-minded to the opportunity that someone could pop into your life in that way. And so, yeah, I've definitely had, and that's not to say I haven't had these magical nights or amazing first dates that just leave me with butterflies and just feeling full and happy and joyful. But it also comes with a lot of sadness and a lot of heartbreak that is not representative in these kind of New York centric movies and TV shows.
Right. Especially in TV shows, they have the one episode problem where they're sad or lonely at the beginning, and then something happens over the course of 20, 45 or 60 minutes, and then all of a sudden it's fixed, it's back to normal, and everybody's happy again. And that's obviously not representative of real life. But at this point in the modern age, do you feel like there's any kind of accurate representation of what modern dating is like, or where can people find an example that might be a little bit more productive or conducive to them really being able to cultivate these strong relationships, not just romantic, but any relationships that they want in their life?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think recently when I had COVID, I binged The Sex Lives of College Girls. If you know that show on HBO, that came out recently. And yeah, it's a college show, about girls in college, but I felt that they did a really great job of representing the realities of dating and just the trials and tribulations that you might be going through in a college setting, as well as being a young adult and just trying to figure it out. And it was representative in all ways as well. I think they did a really good job of diversifying the cast and making it just a really relatable situation. There's actually a girl, one of the main characters is from New York, and she goes to this private school, and then she comes to school with her best friends who then ditch her. And that felt really real and also relatable for me, having gone to a similar kind of vibe setting. I went to Ithaca upstate, so it was very crunchy granola kind of vibe that this school has a bit as well, maybe a little more collegiate than Ithaca was, but that same vibe of just going to this small college town and coming from a very like prep school environment and kind of molding into something different and finding a new identity within that. So that show recently was very relatable for me. And I'm trying to think of a movie. I'm not as big of a movie person, I've come to find. I love rom-coms. Like I've watched all the Netflix rom-coms. I love them when they come out. Like the one that came out over Christmas with Nina Dobrev, who I love. The one where she's catfished and then she goes and meets the guy.
Is it called Love Hard?
Yeah,
maybe?
Love Hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that one was super cute. I think obviously it's a comedy and they're gonna blow it up and
everything's gonna work out.
Yeah, everything's gonna work out and like blah blah blah. But I think, kind of seeing someone in a different light or like being open-minded to someone that you might not have been excited about before, seen in that way, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, actually this person could be something more. I think that was representative of just like, if you're friends with someone, I think being friends first is great, and then all of a sudden one day you're like, wait, I see this person in a different light. Like I'm interested in just what they have to offer and what they bring to the world and how our relationship has evolved. And so yeah, I would say that. But I also think, and, we've kind of been talking down a lot on a lot of these TV shows and movies. There is something beautiful about escapism. And I think that is the point of movies and TV, especially in romance as well, because we love a happy ending, right? I'm not going to want to go and watch a TV show or watch a movie that is going to be sad all the time. There are plenty like that, but I think there's something very beautiful about the hope and continuing that kind of Disney feeling that you did as a kid. And like Emily in Paris, ridiculous, would never happen. None of that would ever happen. But could I study abroad and live my best life finding cute foreign men? Probably. That's not unrealistic. If there's some pull that you can kind of transfer yourself into that setting in a way or take something away from it and relate to it, I think that makes it worthwhile, regardless of if it's quote unquote super relatable.
Yeah, I always like to look at everything with subjectivity, and I feel like that's not done enough with media and movies and TV and pop culture. People think, okay, that happened to that character, that has to happen to me. Whereas if you look at it with a degree of subjectivity, you can say, okay, that happened for that character. This or that may not be realistic or may not be something that applies to me personally or that resonates with me personally, but I can still tap into those same energy sources. So, oh, that character had courage. That's something that I want to embody. That character was brave when they had to struggle through conflict. Okay, that is something that I could do. And being able to look at this pop culture and saying, okay, clearly this is something that resonates with people. Why is it resonating? Is it because we want to be like these characters, or because we can actually learn from the lessons that this character has and apply it in a different way to our own life? I think that that's super important.
Right, because I think there's shows like This Is Us that are very rooted in reality, and really, and the creators say this on the show, about the show all the time, it's a story about an average family. But what they do with it is the way that they tell the story, right? The switching back and forth between time builds it up to making the moments that really define these characters' life seem like this very big, oh my God. But in reality, it's a story about 3 kids, one of whom was adopted on the day that the mom lost her 3rd child, and them growing up and losing their father, and then the mom becoming sick with dementia and marrying the dad's best friend. And all of that is not unrealistic. The things that happen along the way, they get divorced, they date different people, they have kids, they deal with those intersections and new character developments and relationships. It is very rooted in reality. And I think that's why that show has been super successful, because it really allows you to understand, oh, this is why Kevin is the way he is, right? From when he met Sophie back in the day and they got married super young and blah, 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 versus not understanding the character's background. Usually we're thrown into the character at a moment in time where their life is pivoting, and then we see them progress and how they deal with that conflict until they get to a space of new stasis or a new kind of settlement. So I think that show just does a great job at using media in a new way and storytelling in a new way that I don't think we've done before, because then it allows us to think about our own lives, right? Like when I watch that show, I get super emotional. I sometimes have to take breaks in between watching it for weeks, and my mom just goes, why? And I'm like, because it makes me think so much about my own life. It really makes me delve and think back to Liana 10 years ago and why I am the way I am today. And that's hard. It's almost like a therapy thing for me watching This Is Us, I swear.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm obsessed with Milo Ventimiglia and anything he does.
So
but in general, the show, it has so much character development where you are truly able to see people grow and progress over time. And I think that's something tricky too, where it's like we as humans grow and progress over time, but often when issues are addressed in 20 minutes and everybody moves on as though nothing ever happened, this happens a lot when, oh my gosh, this person has a twin brother. And you're like, that's so random. And then they're gone, and then you never hear about them again. And to be able to see that character development is really enriching to a story, I think. And something else that I want to talk about just talking about the progression of time, not just the growth of ourselves, but technology too in pop culture, because when we were growing up, when we were younger, being younger millennials, we still had a time where we had little to no technology in our lives. And maybe these are even times we might not remember too much, but there were movies and TV shows that reflected that, because technology was not, although computers existed long ago, they were not something that were adopted in the mainstream yet. And then as we started getting a little older, I mean, even just as preteens and with flip phones, and you hear mentions of certain social media networks on TV shows. And I just remember at the time thinking, oh, wow, they're talking about all this technology now. It's going to sound so dated. Whereas before, if you had a love story, nobody's cell phone was ringing, and it added to that mystique, and it added to that serendipitous quality of the material, because Really? The chance that you happen to both be at the same cafe on the same day at the same time, and you don't have cell phones, or you happen to just all of these moments where everything is by fate and chance and happenstance. That's really the message that was drilled home. So, how did you feel about seeing all of that technology? And now I think it's done in a really great way on shows like Younger, because the reality is that people are constantly texting and on their phones and immersed in technology. So what was that transition like for you? And how do you feel about that intersection of technology and romance and expectations for life?
Oh, great question. And first of all, shout out and RIP to Younger, because quality A plus cast, such a good cast and such an amazing show. And I'm so sad it's over. But yeah, I feel like growing up, yeah, I also watched a lot of older movies, and you're watching even the Disney Channel shows. No one had cell phones as kids, and then veering into more of the CW or ABC Family life, you start to see the mentions of phones and people texting and things like that. And I remember feeling like, this is so weird. Why are they doing this? It just felt so disconnected, because, and for people who are Gen Z, they're like, this was normal. This is only what I've known. But for us growing up with the technology, it felt like such a weird thing to plop into these shows and movies. It's like, we want to put our phones down to watch TV. We don't want to see someone else on their phone on TV. Like it's so meta almost, which has been such a hot topic recently. So I feel like, yeah, it just felt very weird, matrixy kind of. And then as it's progressed, I think seeing, those bubbles. I remember the first time, I don't remember what show it was or what movie it was, but I remember seeing those bubbles pop up, and I thought they were so weird. I was like, this is how they're going to do this now? This is how they're going to show text messages? Because sometimes they would veer over, the camera would look over the shoulder of the character, and you'd see the text message or something. But obviously that's pretty annoying and hard to do, I'm sure, as well for the people filming and editing and whatnot. So they created these bubbles, and it kind of became, because I think, well, with TV and movies, it's a lot more about what you see than what the characters say. It's a lot more about the vision and the ambiance, and they're kind of showing, not telling most of the time. If you really listen to the dialogue, it's really pretty minimal most of the time. It's just a lot about the visual, because that's the medium that we're watching. Whereas theater is all about the dialogue and all about the progression of the plot. So it's very interesting then watching those. And then even in theater, when you go see a show now and characters have using a phone, but you don't see what they're typing, right? You don't, it's just part of it's a prop. And so it's very different when you have when we have these editing abilities to like add this technology to a screen. And it's just a very different experience. I think they've done a good job with it, and it feels somewhat normal now because I think we've adjusted, but it definitely still feels strange, because I think it's funny when people say, okay, I'm escaping my phone by watching a TV show, or I'm escaping my computer and I'm going to watch a movie. It's like, well, we kind of are, but then we're seeing characters texting on the screen, and we're also watching a screen. It's not like we really escaped that much. It's a very weird world that we live in with technology.
Yeah, it's like we trade the small screen for the medium-sized screen, and then trade that for the large-sized screen. And I think I've seen both sides of the coin, right? Where you watch something that came out before technology was mass adopted, and especially in sitcoms, if you look at Seinfeld and Friends and all the hijinks that they get into, all of the miscommunications that people get into. That's a huge through line through a lot of sitcoms, is that one character thinks that this is happening, but really that's happening. And you just look and you say, if they had cell phones, none of this would be happening right now. This entire arc of an episode, this entire storyline could have been resolved with one text message. I find that to be funny. And then on the flip side of the coin, when I see something that's current in the age of technology and they have that same kind of miscommunication, I'm like, don't these people have cell phones? And so being able to look at it from both sides, that the idea, whether or not technology is involved, is that there still needs to be some kind of miscommunication as a plot point to get the characters engaged in a conflict so that they can come to a resolution. So I thought that was really interesting, how whether technology is utilized or if it's not, or if it even existed, or if it doesn't, that still same dynamic between people remains the same, let alone, I guess there's a third side to that too, where now so much communication is misinterpreted through technology or through text. The tone of a message is misconstrued, or I can't think of a specific example, but if a character receives a message through technology and they misinterpret that message, and then the hijinks that ensue from that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, no, those are great points. It's funny, I started to think about iCarly. I think that was one of the first shows that really, especially for kids, like really pushed the technology. And that was the big with the laptops and computers, obviously, because it was a whole web show. And that was kind of the first that I'd heard. I feel like that was around the time where YouTube was really blowing up as well, and Vine or whatever was going on. And and then on the point of miscommunication over technology, something that I talk about a lot, especially with dating, is just this idea of we can easily hide behind our screens now. And I think that's a big reason why, there's miscommunications or no communication at all, or ghosting, because we can. And that's the easy way out versus back in the day, like with Friends, these characters, it's a comedy, but if something was wrong, they had to confront their friend about it. They literally had to go and say that this really bothered me. I'm upset, blah, blah, blah. And so nowadays it's so much easier to just not do that, because you make plans through your phone. No one just spontaneously shows up, or rarely does, to someone's apartment anymore. And you really have to, I feel like, in both ways, it's like, you are making an effort to not communicate to a friend or someone you're dating. I think it's as equal of an effort if you do that through technology or avoid the technology. It's like, it's right there, but we can just ignore it. We don't have to answer. And that creates a lot of uncomfortable moments. And also, I think now, with seeing pop culture and just the media and the portrayal of miscommunications on screen, I think we kind of, now that's the message, right? It's like, well, if something's too difficult, you can just avoid it.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of as a last thought to wrap up on, I wanted to mention 500 Days of Summer, not just because I'm a Joseph Gordon-Levitt JGL stan, but because at the time I was so, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, I was so uncomfortable with the fact that things didn't work out the way that the audience thought that they would at the end. You think there's going to be this happy ending, they're meant to be, blah, blah, blah. Spoiler alert, they're not. And at the time it was very uncomfortable, but now it's like, that's the beauty of life and of relationships, in that not everything is going to work out. And I think that that is really one of the only examples that I can think of in terms of emotionally detaching yourself from the narrative of the happy ending.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie in so long, and I'm like replaying it in my head as you're talking. But yeah, and I think it also does a really good job of representing giving people a second chance and then it not working out even a second time. Because I think there's a lot of movies where you meet someone, maybe it's, you know, the young love, and then you separate for a bunch. I mean, even with This Is Us, right? Kevin goes back to Sophie later on as well. And again, another representation of the second time is not the charm, or the third time, or however many times they had. So I think it did a really good job of the realities of there may be someone in your life, and a lot of people do have that person in their life where they have a bunch of chances with, or they date them multiple times at different points in their life, and it probably might not work out. But I think knowing that you have that in itself, I think is kind of hopeful, though, because I think without this kind of, like, knowing that you have someone in your life that cares about you the same way, but not having it not work out, it's kind of bittersweet in a way, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was a great time.
Thank you.
I think that, yeah, it gives us perspective on different ways that we can relate to relationships and technology, which are probably the two things that we concern ourselves with the most nowadays in this life. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.